Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Yevamot daf Kaf Hey. We are most of the way through Kaf Dalet Amabet. Let's remind ourselves where we're up to so that we can really have a better sense of where we're heading. Specifically, yesterday we learned a Mishnah that detailed rules regarding rumors. And what happens if there is a rumor of adultery between a man and another man's wife? So we'll call the adulterer Shimon, and we'll call the adulteress Rachel, just for simplicity. So the Mishnah said that even if Rachel's divorced, Shimon's not allowed to marry her because Shimon was the one who was suspected of having adultery with her. And if she does, then we're going to force Shimon to divorce her. Now, Rav said that obligation to divorce, we are only going to put into effect if there are witnesses that say that there was actual infidelity, not just a rumor. Rav Sheshes disagreed. He thought that even if there's just a rumor, we're going to force Shimon to divorce Rachel. And Rav Sheshes questioned Rav based on a brisa, but we explained how the brisa could be consistent with Rav's viewpoint. That's how we ended yesterday. And now we pick up with a second question that Rav Sheshes posed to Rav, and we're 15 lines up from the bottom of 24b, third word on the line, meisvei. So, meisvei, b'med dvarim amrum. So this is again a quote from a brisa, and the brisa says, what is this talking about? And it's referring to our Mishnah. Where is it that there's a requirement to get divorced? That's a requirement for Shimon to divorce Rachel if Rachel did not have any children with her first husband. Aval yesh labanim, but if she did have children with the first husband, lo seitze, then we're not going to force Shimon to divorce her, because v'imbo aidutuma afilu yeshla kama banim teitze. But if in fact witnesses came, well then we would say that even if she had several children, we're going to force her to divorce. Now, why would we not force her to divorce if there are children and it's just a rumor? Because we're worried that people will say that the children from the first marriage are actually the products of the adulterous relationship. And so as a result, they are really mamzerim. And that's a big problem. We don't want to encourage that, especially when all we know is just a rumor. However, when again the Baraisa ends up concluding, if in fact there were witnesses to the act of adultery, well then we have to say that even if there are children, she needs to divorce her second husband. Now, but the key thing and the key proof and support for Rav Sheshes from this brisa is the fact that it seems like if this brisa is pretty clear that when there's just a rumor, if there are no children, then we need to have her divorced, because it's clear that when it says v'imboa edituma, that means when there are witnesses. So the implication is the first part of that brisa is talking about when there are not witnesses. And so, when there are not witnesses, it seems like the brisa is saying, it's pretty clear, the brisa is saying that she needs to get divorced if there are no children. That contradicts Rava, because Rav had said that only if there are witnesses is there a requirement for divorce. So we're going to qualify Rav's statement now. So Rav's statement of saying that in our Mishnah is talking about when there are witnesses, he's also going to say Rav Moki lamas nisin b'yesh labanim b'yesh la'edim. We're actually talking about where there are both children and witnesses. And so now we have two factors that we need to consider. So one is, are there witnesses? And two, are there children? So if there are no children and no witnesses, then we're going to require them to get divorced. If there are children and no witnesses, we will not require them to get divorced. And then if there are witnesses, whether or not there are children, we're going to require them to get divorced. So those are the four different possibilities, and how Rav would hold. So the key difference between Rav and Rav Sheshes is in the case of no witnesses and no children. Rav Sheshes would say no witnesses and no children, we still force them to get divorced. I'm sorry, I apologize, I said that wrong. No witnesses and yes children. No witnesses and yes children is where Rav and Rav Sheshes now still disagree. Rav would say if there are no witnesses but there are children, we will not force divorce. But Rav Sheshes would say that even if there are children, as long as there's a rumor, we're going to force a divorce. So umay doke de Rav laokle lamasnisin v'yesh la banim v'yesh la edim. Now, why is it that that Rav seems to see it as necessary to say that our Mishnah is talking about where there are children and witnesses? The time of the Edim of Kinan. Well, the reason is because if you take a close look at the wording, it seems that there are witnesses, because the Ileka Edim lo mafkinan, right? Because I'm sorry, I apologize. This is all part of the question. So why does Rav say that our Mishnah is talking about where there are children and there are witnesses, and therefore say that if there are witnesses, we require divorce? And if there are no witnesses, we do not require divorce. Lokma b'she'ein labanim afal gav deleka edim. Say that the case is one in which there are no children and no witnesses, meaning our Mishnah, even according to Rav's own viewpoint, if there are no witnesses and no children, we're going to force force Shimon to divorce Rachel because of the adulterous rumor. So why not have, according to Rav, why not understand our Mishnah as talking about no witnesses and no children? And it would go along with the wording of our Mishnah, because our Mishnah says that they have to get divorced. So that's totally consistent, because Rav says that if there are no witnesses and no children, you still get divorced. The only time he says that there have to be witnesses in order to force a divorce is if there are children. So Rava would explain, Masnisim, she say, that the Mishnah posed a difficulty for Rav because my area detani. Why was it that the Mishnah taught the following? Hotzi uha. So if we take a look at the Mishnah up at the top of the daf, and we see the last word on the 6th line of the Gemara, it says Hotzi uha mitachas yado afal pi shekanas yotze. That if they Hotzi'ua means, and they required her to be divorced. So that, who's the they, right? Lisne Hotzi'ah. It should just say he divorced her. Ela ko Hotzi'uha beveistin. So Hotzi'uha means that Beistin was the one who forced the original husband to divorce his wife. And why would they do that? Ubeistin the Edim Hudamafki. The only time that Beistin would require the original husband to divorce his wife is if there were witnesses. And so Rava points out that for Rav, the reason that he holds that there must be witnesses in our Mishnah is because there must be witnesses in our Mishnah, because the Mishnah says that the Beistin is forcing the first husband to get divorced. And so because the Beistin is forcing the first husband to get divorced, that only happens when there are witnesses. And so since there must be witnesses, and the only time witnesses make a difference is if there are also children, so as a result, that is why Rav will say that our Mishnah is talking about witnesses and children. Now,
Rabbi,
yes,
Rabbi, must there be two witnesses or one
yes.
is sufficient?
No, you would need two witnesses for this in order to establish the fact that there was an adulterous relationship. So the e-bite now, what have we done? What we've done is we've posed two brisa questions according to Rav, and Rav has dealt with those questions. The Gemara is now going to offer an alternative explanation for how we can deal with these questions. The e-bite is or we could say Haimas Rebbe, that really those barisas are all according to Rebbe, and they don't have to be consistent with Rav. Rav is the one who says that only if there is only if there are witnesses will a wife with children be forced to divorce her. Hold on one second. Rav says in general that you need to have witnesses, that our Mishnah is talking about where there are witnesses, and these brisas are talking about where, and so these brisas seem to contradict him. So we can say that these brisas are consistent with Rebbe, and Rav has a dispute with Rebbe. And how do we know this? The Tanya, Rochel Yotze ve'isha chogeres b'sinar, right? If you have, Rebbe taught the following halacha, said, if you have somebody who sells perfume, he's a peddler, and he leaves a home, and the husband comes back and sees his wife tying up her undergarments, meaning she's putting on her undergarments. Well, Amar Rebbe, Hawal umuchoar hadavar teitzei, because this is a disgusting kind of behavior. It's certainly suggestive of an adulterous relationship. We say that she is forced to divorce her husband. Rok lamala min hakila. If you see some spittle, above the bed. So again, Amarebi Hoel Umchoar Hadavar Teitzei. Again, the husband comes back, sees after the peddler leaves the home, and sees some liquid on the top of the bed, on the top of the bed canopy. Again, not so very suggestive. That's going to be a problem. Minalim hafuchim takas hamita. If you see that the husband comes back and sees upside down shoes underneath the bed, so as to not provide any kind of footprint and thereby make it more difficult to identify who was there. Amarebi, Hawel Mechora Davar Teitze. Again, all three cases they need to divorce. Now, what's key about this? This is related to the question that you just made, you just asked. Meaning, in all three cases there are no witnesses to the actual act, and so as a result, there's just a suspicion. And yet, Rebbe says that just the suspicion, irrespective of whether or not there are children, is enough to force the husband to divorce his wife. And so that seems to be so certainly that would be sufficient, that we would say that even if the adulterer, namely Shimon, were to marry Rachel, we would tell Shimon that he would have to divorce her as well. And so as a result, we can say that Rav would say that there's no obligation to divorce a wife based on rumor, and therefore, if he does divorce her, he's not forbidden to marry her. And the suspected adulterer is not forbidden to marry her if in fact he does marry her, so he doesn't have to divorce her. So that's the explanation. And so we could say that Rebbe is the one who is the person who is teaching those two brises that we asked the question from. And so as a result, those brises are just inconsistent with Rav's view. So now let's go back and take a look at that third case of suspicion, because Minalim Hafuchim, you said that the shoes are turned over. Well, let's say who he could go and just turn them right back over. It got names in them or something. And so, if you look at the shoe from the right side up, you'll be able to know whose shoes they are. So Ella, no, Makom Minalin Hafukim. You could see that the place where shoes had been was upside down. And so Tachas Hamita, underneath the bed. So you could see that the dust balls underneath the bed had been moved in a way that did not provide a footprint. And so as a result, then there's a reason to be suspicious. So in that situation, Amarebi Ho Mechor Adavar takes a again. So we've clarified that it's not that the actual shoes were left there, because if they were left, well, then you just need to find the owner of the shoes. But no, the remnants, the evidence that there were shoes there. There were shoes put on, it's sort of like the man's side of the bed and the woman's side of the bed. So if suddenly the man's side of the bed underneath the bed which was never cleaned was suddenly dusted off, well, then that would be a reason. And of course, combined with the fact that this happened immediately following that this was noticed immediately following a door-to-door salesman leaving the home, well, then there's a reason to be suspicious, and maybe they should get divorced, according to Rebbe. Okay, now we get the halacha. The halachas hakavasi de Rab, the halachas hakavasi de Rebbe. Whoa! 1 second. We just said that Rab and Rebbe are disagreeing. How could the halacha be both of them? Kasha hilchasa al hilchasa. These two rulings contradict one another. So lo kasha. Ha bekala defasik, ha dekala belofas. No, it depends on the nature of the rumor. And this we're going to have, and now we're going to have 4 different rules that we're going to associate with this rule. So, kala delo pasuk beleka edim. So when you have a rumor that has not stopped, meaning that the rumor has just continued and there are no witnesses, karebi, then Rebbe would say you need to divorce. So even if there's as long as the rumor is a continuing rumor, so even when there are no witnesses, then the adulterer will not be allowed. Shimon will not be allowed to marry Rachel, the adulteress, and they will be forced to get divorced even if they do marry. Kala de pasuk. V'ika edim kirab. And when their rumor has stopped and there are witnesses, well, then the halacha is like Rab, meaning that most importantly, that the halacha is like Rab, kol de pasuk ve'ein a v'leika edim. If there are no witnesses, then they're allowed to remain married. But as Rab notes, our Mishnah is talking about when the rumor may have stopped, but there were witnesses to the adulterous relationship, and so as a result, Rav says that they still need to get divorced. The kala de lo pasuk ad kama. What does it mean for a rumor to not stop? So Amar Abaye, Amri li aim. My mom told me. Now again, we've said this a number of times. It's always worth repeating. Abaye unfortunately was an orphan. His father died before he was born, and his mother died at childbirth, and so he was raised by others. But the important thing to note is that he considered the woman who raised him to be his mother. And he will often quote her aphorisms and her ideas. So what did his mother tell him about rumors? Domi demasa yoma ufalga. When you have suspicion, be suspicious when a rumor lasts for a day and a half. The low amran ella delo pasuk veni veni. And when we say a day and a half, it means it's got to be continuous a day and a half. Can't have a rumor for the morning, the rumor end at the night, and then another rumor comes in the next morning. That's not a day and a half. Aval pasuk beni beni pasuk. But once it stops in the meantime, that's it. It's got to be a different rumor. Now, what does Rashi say when Rashi notes 1, 2, 3? 4 lines down? What does it mean to stop a rumor? Meaning, you don't usually see a rumor just stop. Now, I guess it's possible that people stop telling it because it's been told enough, but the Rashi helps us understand what it means to pasuk. Sheyatsa kol acher. What it means is that another rumor has started. Lomar sheker hu halaz. and that rumor says that the first rumor was false. So the point is that you need to have some kind of contrary rumor to undo the first rumor. And if that happens within a day and a half, well, then that is a rumor that has stopped.
Rabbi,
Yes.
isn't this contrary to everything that we've been
About talking Lashon Hara?
Yeah.
100%. 100%. But this is, we dealt with this issue, I think, yesterday. We said that it was either yesterday or the day before, but it was definitely one of these two dapim. And we said that Jewish people need to do two things. One is we're not allowed to tell Lashon Hara. But the other thing is we're not allowed to do things that will encourage people to tell Lashon Hara. So we can't do things, you don't walk into a McDonald's, et cetera, et cetera. There are things that our behavior needs to be such that people are not going to tell rumors about us. So we recognize, Judaism recognizes, Judaism is not a religion of just angels. Judaism is an applied religion to everyday life. And everyday life says, you know what? Even though people are prohibited to tell Lashon Hara, they sometimes they do.
People
I will not. You go ahead.
People are very fragile. People
Correct.
are very right. That's the nature of the human being.
That's exactly right. Now, I will know one other point that is worth making on this, and that is that there are times when Lashon Hara is permitted. In particular, if you were to tell me that you were relying on Shimon as a witness in a big case of yours, and I know that Shimon is an adulterer. Now, of course, that I would probably have to have actual some kind of evidence, but I would be allowed to tell you, just be aware that you may not want to rely on Shimon as a witness. So there are times that Lashon Hara, quote unquote, Lashon Hara is permitted, but you're absolutely right that on some level this is really talking about that there has been Lashon Hara going on. So the lo amran ella the lo pasuk masira. Now, another qualification for the rumor continuing is that if the rumor stops because people are afraid that Shimon is going to beat them up, well, that is not a rumor that has really stopped. That's a rumor that has been continuing. About pasuk machmazirahu. If it actually stops because of the fear, well, then it's the fear that caused it. It's not actually a stopped rumor. The lo amran ela deleka oivim. And in addition, we need to recognize that people are mean to the people to whom they view as enemies. And so if Shimon has an enemy, and everybody knows that Shimon has an enemy, well, then we have to be suspicious that the rumor is not a valid rumor. And so when is a rumor a valid rumor? It's only when it doesn't stop as a result of fear, and when it's not started as a result of an enemy. Meaning, about egoivim, if we know that that Shimon has enemies in the town, so it could be the enemies that started the rumor, and so as a result, we're going to disregard it. So this is an interesting balance of recognizing the power of Lashon Hara, the fact that we have to be, on some level, acknowledge the existence of that Lashon Hara, while at the same time thinking about causes of Lashon Hara, reasons that it might stop, etc. And so we have to factor all of those factors in order to decide whether or not a rumor is a valid rumor. So now now that we've covered all that, we're going to quote a Mishnah from Maseches Gittin that prohibits remarriage when the husband divorces due to a bad reputation for the wife or because the husband has made a vow. Now, and Rashi is going to explain why do we not let the husband remarry? Usually, if somebody gets divorced, as long as the wife has not married somebody else, he's allowed to remarry her. Why don't we allow these cases to marry the wife again? And Rashi explains that we don't allow the first husband to remarry his wife because we're worried that the following is going to happen. The wife will marry someone else. And now, because there was the theoretical possibility of his marrying her, what he could say is the following: really, my entire divorce was based on bad faith. It was all on false pretenses. I thought that I had no choice. I thought I was forced to divorce her because of her bad reputation. I thought I was forced to divorce her because of a vow that he took that he would not benefit from her. And so as a result, he can say that the divorce was under false pretenses, and as a result, the divorce should be considered invalid. Well, if that happens, well then, if there were children between the wife and her new husband, those children will be suspected of being mamzerim, of being illegitimate, because the divorce won't be a valid divorce. That means her marriage wasn't a valid marriage. It means that she was still married to her first husband, which means that the children were born out of wedlock, and not just out of wedlock, through adultery. And so that would be bad. So that's what we're going to deal with. So let's take a look inside. Tanan Hasam, Hamotzi as Ishto Mishum Shemra. If one divorces his wife because of a bad reputation, Lo Yachzer, he's not allowed to take her back. Mishum Neder, if he does so because of a vow, Lo Yachzer, he's not allowed to take her back. Okay, so Shalach le Rabba Bar Huna le Rabba Bar of Nachman. So now we're going to ask the question: what happens if if the husband does take her back? Do we force them to divorce again, or do we say that as long? Of course, we're talking about a situation where the woman did not marry somebody else, but she just divorced him, and now he wants to take her back. Do we say, like in our Mishnah, that we're going to force them to divorce, or do we not? And so we're going to try and use our Mishnah as evidence. So Shalach le Rabba Bar Huna le Rabba Bar Rav Nachman. So Rabba Bar Huna asked Rabba Bar Rav Nachman, Yilam Denu Kenas Mahu Shiyotzi. I'm sorry, Yilam Denu Rabbeinu we Kenas Mahu Shiyotzi. So if did our teach us whether the law is that if they get married again, do they have to divorce? So Amar Lei. Rav Nachman said back, Tanina, we have a Mishnah. It's namely our Mishnah. If you have suspicions of an adulterous relationship, and they're divorced, and the court forces him to divorce her, even though the adulterer married her, we force her to get divorced. So that would suggest that we would also force these people to get divorced. But Rabba Bar Huna comes back and says, 1 second, that's not such a great proof. Amar Le, Midami, are these cases comparable? Hasam Hotziuha. There, the husband was forced to divorce her, meaning it was talking about witnesses of an actual adulterous relationship, as we saw Rav had said about our Mishnah. But here, she was divorced voluntarily by the husband. So they're not comparable cases. So for Rabba Bar Rav Nachman, actually, I hold that Rabba Bar Rav Nachman says that he holds that our Mishnah is talking about where the husband divorced the wife on her own. It was not a case of witnesses. It was a case of just suspicion. So, all right. So, but now still, Rabba Bar Huna points out there's another difference. But still, these cases aren't comparable. In the case in Gittin, we're talking about the original husband taking back his wife. And here we're talking about the adulterer. That's not comparable at all. So Amar Le, Rabba Bar Huna says back, Rabba Bar Rav Nachman says back to Rabba Bar Huna, Shapir Dami Ahadadi. 1 second. They can be comparable. Hacha Amar Rabbonim Lo Yichanos V'im Kanes Yotzi. Hasam nami amri rabbanan lo yachzir v'im kanas yotzi. That you can say that they're both comparable because none of this is biblical. It is all rabbinic. It is all a rabbinic requirement that they get divorced. And so just as the rabbis say that they get divorced in connection with the get case, they could, or just as they have to get divorced in connection with the adultery case, they'll have to get divorced in connection with the get case. We could say that they are comparable, the lohi. But in fact, this is not a valid response because they really aren't comparable. Hasam alume alme klakala, where in our Mishnah it's an adulterer that's marrying the divorcee. So Shimon is marrying Rachel. So then you are strengthening the rumor. You had a rumor that Shimon and Rachel had an adulterous affair, and now they're married. Well, that certainly makes it likely that they had that adulterous affair. How about Haka in the case in Gittin, Amrinan Kambe Bekalam Velese. So then we can say that, look, the guy investigated the rumor, found that it wasn't true, and so he remarried her. So as a result, in the end, we say that there is no proof. So although the Mishnah in Gittin tells us that if a man divorces his wife because of a rumor, he is not allowed to remarry her. If he went ahead and remarried her anyway, we cannot say for certain what the halacha will be, whether or not the divorce is required. Okay, so now we're ready for our next Mishnah, and our next Mishnah deals with whether someone can be the witness of a woman's status and as becoming eligible to be married again, and then marry her. So let's take a look and see the details. So Hamedi gave Medina Sayam Amar B'fanei Nechtab B'fanei Nechtam. So Lo Yisa Es Ishto. If a man comes from overseas and says, which is the required saying, that it was signed, this get was signed before me, it was written in front of me and signed in front of me, then he himself is not allowed to be the one to marry because he is the witness that verifies the divorce itself. And so there's on some level, we don't want him to have any incentive to testify associated with that. Mace, however, if he and what about other cases? What if he testifies that the first husband died? Haragtiv, or he testifies, I killed the first husband, or Hargunu, or we killed the first husband. Lo Yisa Es Ishto. Similarly, we're not allowed to, he's not allowed to marry her. But she would be allowed to marry other people. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, but Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He says, Haragtiv, if I say I killed him, so lo tinaseh ishto, then that situation, the woman can't marry anyone. Not only can he not marry her, but she can't remarry at all. We don't believe that the guy we won't believe the admission of murder. Harganuhu, if however, the guy says that we killed him, well then tinaseh ishto. So then she can marry somebody else, but she can't marry this guy. So now let's take a look and understand this detail. So Taima, so first we're going to look at the get case. The implication is why is the get? Why can the person who brought the get, can the messenger not marry her? It's only because it was from abroad. Because we're relying on his testimony to validate it. Aval me'eretz Yisrael. However, if the get was brought within Eretz Yisrael, because in which case we don't have to rely on his testimony to remarry. So Yisa Es Ishto, well then he would be allowed to marry the wife. Well, in second, Vahames, what about the case of when the man testifies that the husband died? There also, although obviously his testimony is important, we do not rely solely on it because we have a brisa. So the Amar Mar Isha Daiko Manasya Uminasva, that we say that a woman will carefully investigate and only then marry. So Vikatani, and we said Lo Yisa Es Ishto. in that situation, and yet nonetheless, we said that if a person testifies about the death of a husband, then we say that he's not allowed to marry her. So Hasam Leka Kasaba. The key difference is there's a difference between where there's a written document, when there's and when there's not a written document. When there's not a written document with respect to the death, so then that's why his testimony has greater importance, even though it might not be the decisive factor. We do depend on it. So as a result, that's why he can't marry her. But when there's a get written in Eretz Yisrael, where we have access to the witnesses, so then the man who brings the get has effectively no role in testimony. And so as a result, that is why in that situation, he is allowed to marry the divorcee. Ditnan, as we learned, and we see that this distinction is an important one. Ma bein get lemisa. What's the difference between testimony associated with a get and testimony associated with death? Shak sav mochiach. The point is that in the get case, there is a written document, and so we can provide it is extra trustworthy. So that is the case with respect to get. Now we're going to discuss the case of the testimony, and it's going to be a little complicated. So I have here a nice little square that opponent square, I think it's called, that details all the different possibilities that we're going to get to. So Meis Haraktiv, Meis Haraktiv, Hargunuhu, Lo Yisas Isha, right? He died, I killed him, and we killed him. You're not allowed to marry the wife. So Hu Nihu de Lo Yisas Isha. Apparently, he himself is the one who's not allowed to marry the wife. But another person she can marry. Well, 1 second. We're going to have now two statements, one from Rav Yosef and one from Rav Menashe. Rav Yosef said, Ploni Ravani Laonsi. This person, now we're talking about a man saying this person sodomized me against my will. He and another person are sufficient witnesses to put somebody to death, meaning the victim of sodomy is allowed to be one of the two witnesses against the sodomizer. But Lirtzoni, if he says that the sodomy happened with my consent, so then then he is considered somebody who is wicked, and as a result, somebody who has sinned, and as a result, Torah Amra, Al Tashes Yadcha Im Rasha Lios Eid Hamas. Don't put your hand with an evildoer to be a violent witness, to be a witness in robbery or in theft. And so as a result, the Torah is telling us that when we know somebody to be an evildoer, then we say that their testimony is not valid. So in that situation, if he says that it was done with his consent, since he's considered a sinner, his testimony is not valid. So too here, the guy says he killed the guy. So how could we possibly believe him? And if you want to say, Shiny Edis Isha to Akilu Barabana, that, well, there's a big difference, because in that case over there, where Rav Yosef had his statement, we were dealing with testimony about a third party, but there was no woman who was going to end up being an aguna. But maybe we can say that when the testimony is going to allow a woman to get remarried, so then maybe the rabbis are lenient. But we now have a second statement. This one's from Rav Menashe. Bahama Rav Menashe, and we turn to Kafei Amabed. If there's somebody who has done theft, but it is only theft that is prohibited rabbinically, not theft that is not theft that is prohibited biblically. For example, if, as Rashi points out, if the person bets on the horses or is gambles on dice, so those are considered, that's considered theft by rabbinically, and so as a result, in general, they're not allowed to testify, but we're going to say in connection with a woman, in order to allow her to marry, we're going to say that he can testify. However, Gazlan de Divrei Torah, but when it comes to theft that is biblically prohibited, we say that it's not allowed. And so as a result, if you combine these two statements, combine the statement of Rav Menashe and Rav Yosef, well, then we're stuck. Basically, how can the rabbis in our Mishnah, how can the first opinion in our Mishnah allow the testimony of saying, I killed the guy, enable the woman to remarry somebody else? Sure, the man himself can't remarry her, but how could she marry anybody? So name a Rav Menashe de Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Maybe we have to say that Rav Menashe holds only like Rabbi Yehuda, because again, Rabbi Yehuda says that in the case of somebody who says that that I killed the guy, then nobody's allowed to marry her. We don't believe his testimony at all. So we could say that Rav Menashe just holds like Rabbi Yehuda, in which case we can say that when it comes to Rav Yosef, he agrees, that the reason that he is consistent with the rabbis is that we're lenient to prevent agunot, even if there's a biblical violation. So Amar Lach Rav Menashe, but Rav Menashe would tell you, Ana da Amri afilu Rabbanan, I can actually be even according to the rabbis. The time of the Rabbanan Haka Kid Rabba, and that the rabbis are thinking like Rabba. The Amar Rabba, Adam Karam Eitzel Atzmo. A person is considered his own relative. The Ein Adam Mesim Atzmo Rasha, and a person is not allowed to make himself a sinner. So as a result, that is why he can agree with even the rabbis. So the rabbis say you can't make yourself a sinner, and so as a result, since you can't make yourself a sinner, you can when you say that the woman that I killed the guy, so your statement with respect to the death is believed, but your statement with respect to you doing the killing is not believed. And so as a result, Rav Menashe can say that even he would agree with, even the rabbis would agree with his opinion, could have agreed with his opinion. And the reason, by the way, I should have said this at the beginning of these questions, is that Rav Menashe and Rav Yosef are both Amoraim. And so ideally, we would like to have both of their statements be consistent with both of the opinions in our Mishnah. Of course, if it can't be, we can say that they're arguing that their argument is based on a Tanaitic argument. But ideally, we'd like to say that they could go with both. So now we're going to turn to Rav Yosef. Lema Rav Yosef Damar Rav Yehuda. Maybe Rav Yosef has to be like Rabbi Yehuda, and we say that no. He, of course, again, it fits very nicely with Rabbi Yehuda because Rabbi Yehuda says that we don't allow the widow to marry anyone if the man says that I murdered him. Why? Because we don't believe him, because he's not a valid witness. And Rav Yosef would say that that's exactly right. We say that he's not a valid witness. But how about the rabbis? How could Rav Yosef be consistent with the rabbis? So Amaralach Rav Yosef, Ana de Amri Afilu Rabbanan. I can be even like the rabbis. The shiny Edus Isha de Akilu Rabbanan. And the point is that although I made my statement in connection with the sodomy case, my statement does not apply to a woman trying to remarry. In that situation, we will believe the testimony of somebody who is a sinner. And even if they, and with second, and what about if they are a biblical sinner? For Rav Menashe, what the Amar Rabbi Yehuda, and as for Rav Menashe, Rav Yosef would say that he holds like Rabbi Yehuda, meaning Rav Yosef would say that the rabbis are consistent with my view and would disagree with Rav Menashe. And so basically what you end up with is Rav Menashe says the rabbis would agree with me and disagree with Rav Yosef. And the Rav Yosef says the rabbis agree with me and disagree with Rav Menashe. And so and so everybody ends up being able to hold like everyone else. So Haraktiv, what about the case of so we said Rabbi Yehuda said that if I killed him, then he's not allowed, nobody's allowed to marry her, and her Ganuhu Tina say. But if they say we killed him, then she's allowed to remarry. So Maishna Haraktifu, Maishna Haraknu. What's the difference? Why should we believe the guy in either case? In both situations, he's saying that he was involved in the sin. So Amar Rav Yehuda, again, this is key. It's Rav Yehuda. This is Rav Yehuda, the Amora, but Omer Ani Hayisi Im Horgav. No. You have to understand, when it says Harganuhu, it doesn't mean that I was involved with those who were killing him. I just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I was there with the people who killed him. Hatanya, and we got a brisa that shows this kind of thinking. Amrulo Rabbi Yehuda. So they said to Rabbi Yehuda. So again, this is a brisa that continues the argument between the rabbis and Rabbi Yehuda from our Mishnah. What did the rabbis say to Rabbi Yehuda? Maisa belistim echad sheyatza lihareg b'megizas kapotkia. There was a thief, a bandit who was taken out to be executed at the crossroad of Cappadocia. All right, and so Amar Lahem, and what did this bandit say to everybody who was watching? L'chu imru lo la'esus Shimon ben Kohen. Go tell the wife of Shimon ben Kohen, that ani haragti es bala v'chanisasi l'lod, that I killed her husband when I was going in to load. V'amrila v'chanisaso l'lod. And some people say it was no, when I killed him when he was coming into load. The hisiyu as he showed. And remarkably, the rabbis allowed the wife to remarry. So doesn't that show, the rabbis show that we believe somebody to say I killed him in order to allow the people to marry somebody else? So Amar Lahem Misham Raya. Rabbi Yehuda said back to the rabbis, that's not a proof, because what did he actually say? He actually said, "Ba'omer ani hayisi im horgav." I was with those who killed him, not that he actually killed him. One second, b'halisdim katani. One second, but the Brisa said, still, it seems like this shows that we believe thieves, because the Brisa said that this guy was a bandit. So no. Shenispas al yedei listios. No, he was taken into custody because of banditry, meaning this guy was really a poor guy because he was in the really wrong place at the wrong time, and the people came and they captured him because they thought he was in the company of bandits. Well, one second, but they were taking him out to kill him. If he wasn't actually a bandit, why was he being executed? So Beidina de Obdikachabim. Because it was not a Jewish court that was killing him. It was a non-Jewish court, and non-Jewish courts are less discriminating. As we see in the actual world, we see that very often the innocent are actually found guilty. And so as a result, that is why we were allowed to believe him. So Rabbi Yehuda has now explained away this interesting story of the execution of a bandit. Okay, so now we come to the next Mishnah. So the next Mishnah continues the discussion of where a man plays a role in the divorce of a woman and whether the man may marry the divorced woman. So again, if a chacham says, so let's just back up and teach an important rule, and that is that if somebody makes a vow, the classic way to nullify the vow is to go before a 3-panel judge and do Hataras Nadarim, as we do every Erev Yom Kippur or Erev Rosh Hashanah. And so here we're dealing. However, you can also go to an individual chacham who has the ability. So here. But we're not going. The Gemara is not going to be completely clear initially as to whether we're talking about a chacham working on his own or a chacham who's part of a 3-person court. But in the end, we'll find out that this is a chacham working on his own. But so let's just go with that assumption at the end, the final conclusion. And so we have a chacham who a woman comes to him and says, "Listen, in my anger at my husband, I made a vow that I will not benefit from him whatsoever. And now she wants to undo the vow. And he says, the Chacham says, no, I'm sorry, you're not able to undo your vow. You need to have some basis of regret to undo your vow. You don't really regret it, and so I'm not going to undo your vow. So the Chacham she'aser es ha'isha b'neder al bala. So a Chacham who says that the woman is not allowed to be with her husband as a result of her vow, saying that she's not going to benefit from him. So that Chacham is not allowed to marry her when she gets divorced, because basically he's forcing her to be divorced. However, if you have a Chacham before whom chalitza or miyun again is when there was an underage person who was married not by the father, but the father had passed away, and so she's married off by the brothers and the mother. So she has the ability until she becomes an adult to say, I don't want to be with this guy. And so that is and that's called miyun. And if a woman performs miyun in front of the man, in front of a chacham, or chalitza in front of the chacham, so then Yisa'ena, he is allowed to marry her. Why? Because he's part of the beis din. And so that's suggesting that that's a legal situation. So hatira Yisa'ena. 1 second. So this implies that if in fact the man did permit her in the first case in our Mishnah, that he would be allowed to marry her. Right? So why was he not allowed to marry her? Only because he said that she was continued to be prohibited. So b'mayas kinan, what kind of case are we talking about? If we're talking about a single judge, is there a case where a single judge has the ability to release somebody from vows? Va'amar Rabbi Chia bar Rabin, Amar Rav Amram, Tana hataras nadarim b'shlosha. In order to do hataras nadarim, to release people from vows, you need 3 stages. You need 3 people. The ela b'tulasa. But if there are 3, michashide, do we actually suspect anybody of doing anything wrong? Because we learned in our Mishnah, we say that as long as there's a beis din and there are 3 people, we're not worried about people engaging in any misbehavior. So la'olam bechad. No, really, we're talking about a single stage. When you have a single expert, then that single expert is allowed to grant the release of a vow on his own. So hachinami biyachad mumcha. So here too, we're talking about a single individual. And so tomorrow, stay tuned as we continue the discussion of situations where a man plays a role in a woman's divorce or a woman being able to marry other people, and whether or not such a man may marry the divorced woman. We're also going to finish the 2nd chapter of Yevamot and begin the 3rd chapter. So very exciting day tomorrow, God willing. And I look forward to actually teaching it in person at HIR before Mincha. So please stay tuned to the WhatsApp and to the email for details as to location and time.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good Shabbos.
Have a good Shabbos. Have a wonderful day.
Be well.
Be well.